Penn?
You know, there's a saying in Alaska on a lot of projects, build it and they will come. And of course, that often doesn't turn out to be true. When I was heading up ADA, Alaska Industrial Development, one of the things that was being talked about is we didn't have enough sheets of ice in this town for all the hockey that went on. And so finally, there was a sheet of ice built out there at O'Malley and Old Seward. And that thing immediately filled up. And one of the few things that actually does sort of expand with its availability are sports complexes. Same thing you can say out at the center, the church out where the seafood plant was. That also is expanded. So I think that a sports complex is a good idea. I think it actually will grow. The one over here is used all the time. I've spent a lot of time here, and gets a lot of use, and it's pretty worn out. So I think this facility is necessary. I do agree with a lot of the budget points that the folks have raised, though. It is an allocation of resources. It is going to require real operating commitment. But sports generally works, and in a town of this size with really 400,000 people, when you reach out to Kenai and the Valley, that's a good market for this kind of facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Mr. Berkowitz, what are your plans for improving K-12 education in rural Alaska?
We've got a situation in rural Alaska where teacher turnover is 33% on an annual basis, where 60% of kids who start high school don't finish it, where there's no vocational and technical training, where there's no universally available preschool. So there are a lot of needs in rural Alaska. And one of the difficulties we have, and I've worked extensively across rural Alaska, it is wrong to say all of rural Alaska can be described in one particular way. It is not a monolithic place. There are unique conditions in each region, much less across the state. But we have got to do things to make sure that the educational system there is of quality. It takes place in safe schools. I've been in too many schools that OSHA would shut down as being unsafe workplaces. And I don't know how we can expect kids to learn if we wouldn't theoretically even allow teachers to teach there. So we need to enhance that. But when I always come back to what you need for an educational system, one of the things I find most distasteful about No Child Left Behind is it's built around this idea of standardized testing. I've never met a standardized kid. I've never been to a standardized district. And we need to respect the individual characteristics of each child and each district. And I think that is very critical. We need to start paying teachers in the state better. One of the worst things that happened during the time I served in Juneau was when they changed the retirement system from a defined benefit to a defined contribution system. It's the difference between knowing what you're going to get to knowing what you're going to give. It's a sucker's bet. And there's a lot of teachers who aren't sticking around to earn the kind of experience to be good teachers. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in rural Alaska. But we need to prize education. We need to make sure students emerge with the ability to think critically, to empathize, and exercise intellectual curiosity. And then we'll have done justice, educational justice.
Thank you, Mr. Berkowitz. Mr. Walker.
We are failing our obligation for education in rural Alaska. Judge Gleason recently ruled and aggressively ruled against the state of Alaska in that the way we handle rural education. It had to do with the standardized testing. Somebody filed suit and said, wait a minute, don't hold us for standardized testing. We're not getting a standardized education. We're not getting the same deal that you're getting someplace else. There shouldn't be a divide between rural and urban Alaska on education. She was very, very clear in what the problems were. And it wasn't a matter of lack of money necessarily. It was a matter of the way it was dealt with, the way it was delivered. We do have a high turnover rate in rural Alaska. And one of the reasons we do is we went from Tier 3 to Tier 4. Tier 4, suddenly, we become a training ground for educational teachers. They'll come up and get their couple years of experience, and then they'll move on. We need to make sure that those that live in rural Alaska are able to get the education and come back and teach in their home community. I think that's critically important. Some of the education, our educational system could be defined this way. If we had a restaurant and half the people that came in to eat their meal got up and left before finishing their meal, they couldn't stand any longer, we wouldn't stay in business very long. That's our educational system in rural Alaska. Well, half the students leave early in the system. The reason is that we're not offering them what they're looking for. We don't have the vocational opportunities that they should have. Some do. Some have done that. It's been very successful. Dillingham has done that. Kodiak has done that. It's not rural, obviously, but they'll bring in the fisheries into the system. We need the vocational opportunities into the school system so they have a reason to stay in the school system. You know, if we don't do that, it's just going to continue on. I think Judge Gleason, I don't recall the number of months it was given, but it was a fairly short timeline to fix the problem in rural Alaska. Now, that's part of the bond package that's been put out to let the voters be part of the solution, but that's not what her order said. We need to fix the problem in rural Alaska. We need to fix it now because everybody in Alaska under the Constitution is entitled to the same level of education. We're not serving that now, and we need to serve that. We owe that to all of our students throughout the entire state.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Statewide, the high school graduation rate is about 60-61%. For Native Alaskans, it's below 50. It's about 47%. There are school districts in the state where the high school graduation rate is about 23%. It's horrific. It's wrong. And if I were going to offer one solution, if I were going to offer one thing I'd target on and focus on, it'd be at the opposite end of high school, which is pre-kindergarten, right? Head Start. There's nothing you can do that produces more results than to make a long-term investment in pre-kindergarten. The benefits, not only educational, but societal, health-wise, it's a stunning payback. It's like 10 to 1 that you get back in an investment in pre-kindergarten. And so, you know, if you want to sort of bring all, there's lots of things you got to do. There's no doubt about it. You got to fix our retirement system. I agree, it's wrong for teachers. They should get a stable retirement system. You got to have decent facilities. You got to have decent people in the classroom. But pre-kindergarten, focus like a laser beam on that. Get it done. Put that into place, and it'll take a while, but you'll see the payback again in reading scores, in proficiency, in crime rates, in all kinds of ways. I'm a passionate believer in pre-kindergarten, and that'd be job one the day I get elected governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You know, there are all kinds of dropout rates in rural Alaska, but the reason that kids drop out is because they don't see a future. There's not hope. And I think jobs equal opportunity and opportunity equals hope. So the first thing is we also have to make sure that there's economic opportunity. But there are as many problems that you can think of in rural Alaska, but there are some simple solutions that have worked. Let's start with ANSEC. What Herb Schroeder did is he traced back why Native kids weren't being successful at the university. He traced it all the way back to the high school and realized the kids, first the teachers had very low expectations for the kids. They weren't able to take the kind of coursework that they needed to be prepared. There weren't the kind of fundamental support that would help them be successful. So he went about solving that problem. There's something called the Alaska Native Teacher Initiative, where we have aides all over the place that help in the schools, but they can't get certificated, so they can't be teachers, even though they're local. So an organization came together to help them get their certificate, get the coursework they needed, what have you. They live in the community. They want to stay there. I was in Bethel when all those secretaries were out there from President Obama's cabinet, and I was in a bed and breakfast that was full of teachers that were cycling through the circuit. And they'd go about 2 years in this town or that town. They had no investment in the kids or to see them through their life and their success. I met the principal of Bethel High School. Bethel had been labeled the dropout factory of Alaska. And today they're AYP, adequate yearly performance. I said, how did you get there? And she said, one simple thing. We looked at the kids that weren't graduating on time, realized they gave up because they weren't getting anywhere. They allowed them to take electives so that they, in their freshman, sophomore year, so they could realize they could be successful and that school could be fun. It turned it around that fast. I think we need to look at reasonable solutions.
Thank you.